Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here at the last day Europe conference. Thanks, guys, for organizing and for inviting me to speak. Um, as you mentioned, Alexei, I mean, I will talk a bit about less huge, but main of my topic would be less and my experience with with my own adoption. What I tried to summarize in the case study. And I will drive, as I was able to also join a less huge adoption. I was thinking to make visible what were the parallels and differences that I realized. The focus of this presentation was actually to show what I considered important to put in place in order to enable cultural shift in your organization. And as mentioned before, parallels and differences between less and less huge regarding this this fact. A first disclaimer: as Alan mentioned actually in his talk before, it's always not a good idea to start a less adoption in an evolutionary way. This presentation will show you exactly what I mean by that, how you would do it in a really evolutionary way, even more clearer and harder than the way Elad describes it in his presentation. And I would suggest to learn from this presentation, and hopefully, if you have the chance not to do it that way. Still, you could achieve some success like we did, but there are clearly better ways, and I will talk about that. So I'm Robert Briese, and as Alexei mentioned, I'm a certified LESS trainer since end of last year. I work with big and small companies. Right now, I work at Yellow, and I have the pleasure to work with a small team and experiment with applying less over multiple products, which is something very interesting. And I hope that I will be able to report on that in future. I've founded a company in 2013 called Lean Sherpas, and we do trainings and coaching on lean and agile development. The focus of this presentation, as I mentioned, will be about my LESS case study, and similar to Elad's presentation, it will be about a story how to transition from waterfall into into agile. And basically, I'm talking here about a company that I'm also not able to share the name, who was actually doing e-commerce store. The e-commerce platform was using a specific product, which is SAP HYBRIS as an application platform. And I don't know if you're familiar with SAP. Luckily, this platform is not a core SAP product, and it is not built on ABAP. But is built on the Spring framework, which enables building web applications on top of the Java Enterprise Edition platform. And the organizational setup was quite messy. Basically, we had an IT organization and a business organization, and just many layers below, there was this this team or multiple teams that were working on this e-commerce platform. And the trickiest part of this is that actually the lowest level, the lowest common share manager for all people of the different organization was the CEO. And I would say that's pretty much the worst situation you can land with. Because as we know, in one of the three adoption principle, a LESS guide, is that you want top-down and bottom-up support. And that's pretty difficult to get when the top-down support needs to come directly from the CEO of such a huge company. The technical team was looking like this. We had basically many different components teams. We had actually 3 different teams working on this SAP HYBRIS application. Then we had SAP backend, like CRM and ERP systems, and there was a team around that. And then we have different functional teams, like architecture, user interface experts, testing, and DevOps. And basically the technical work stream, on top of that, we had work stream leads for each of the teams that were reporting to the enterprise architecture and a kind of program manager. And there was also project management office, as you usually find in large organizations. So it was quite a complex setup that you might find in many big organizations. And had pretty bad experience with the current level of performance. And the first thing actually that I did was when I joined, I created a summary of the challenges. And that's actually I was doing that by talking with singular individuals from the business organization and from the technical teams. And you can see here some of the things that the teams were struggling with. So after coming with the list, I was basically asked to come up with a plan. I had basically a chance to speak with the chief digital officer, which was the highest manager on the business side. I think I got like 10 or 15 minutes, and I had to prepare for this meeting to show him what I was envisioning, what can be done in order to get rid of like the challenges and improve the organization and the delivery teams, basically. And what I presenting here is basically the LESS adoption as suggested by Craig Larman. And he actually, this is, I think, the way that I would try to do it if I had the chance next time, to spend 1 day technical coaching with the teams, and which is quite critical, because it helps you to learn about the organization with hands-on on the code, and working with the people and the tools that they use.
The question from the audience: did management also read all the books that you've just mentioned?
No. So again, this is something that I would like suggest to doing, to send them the books, or at least the documentation in form, and do this so-called informed consent workshop, how Craig LARMAN'S likes to call it.
Okay.
So just to make sure, basically, before I start to show how I did it with the knowledge that I have back at that time, which is around 5 years ago, And similar to Elad, I mean, there was the LeSS framework back then, but the third book was not out yet. And all I had was basically the first two books and the information that was on the website. And unfortunately, also, I was not aware about this kind of adoption, the adoption guides and so on. So basically, if you have the chance, it's super important, and I will talk about this also at the end, to to do a workshop, to do education, also as Elad mentioned, and at the end, after doing the workshops and this informed consent workshop, ask the teams basically if they want to engage in such a working model or not. Now, what I did is, again, I tried to, after doing the many interviews that I did and talking with people, I tried to summarize the overall goals of the transition. And those were things like improving the code quality and the number of defects that the teams were struggling with, and especially re-engage the development teams and create ownership, which was missing and visible missing on both sides. And other things like optimize the system to faster deliver of customer value, which is extremely close or is the system optimizing goal for LeSS, together with adaptability. And I came basically with this kind of list, and use my time to convince the highest manager on the business side that there is a change needed, and we need to to reorganize the organization. And together with that, also prepared a list of prerequisites that I felt at that time were important to clarify and to summarize, that are needed in order to be able to do this kind of change. So what I ask is that we come up with a shared working model that should come up of a workshop that was done together with business and development. And then we set up new teams that are self-managing, cross-functional, and co-located, and are long-lived teams. And that we need to educate the teams in Scrum, create a common definition of done, and we need one product backlog. Things that I was aware back then that are crucial for doing LeSS. Now, the next thing that naturally you are asked to do is to come up with the transition plan. And that's exactly what I did back then. So I presented a transition timeline in my mind at that time, which fitted exactly what the management thought and they wanted to see. And as you can see here, is like, okay, we're gonna do a 1 month setup where we're gonna do these workshops, where we're gonna talk about definition of done. We're gonna set up the teams. By the way, yes, in the meantime, we're gonna take care of some maintenance and updates work, and do some other onboarding of other tools, and you know, after 1 month we're good, and we work in Scrum. Actually, I didn't use the term LeSS at that time, and I never felt the need to use that. Because I was feeling that it might, you know, it might be misused or used in a wrong way. Again, that was something that fit the expectation of the management that time, and they say, look, perfect, do it, and we expect results starting in June. And of course, as you can imagine, in that short period of time, we barely managed to do just a couple of things of all the prerequisites that we wanted to do. We managed to do a workshop and discuss again this pains and the reason that we want to change the way we're working. We managed to do to reestablish the teams and to change the teams into feature teams, but those were mainly the only achievements that we managed in that time frame. What we didn't do and we gradually been able to do was come up with one product backlog and one product owner. So we didn't start it with that from the beginning, and also we didn't have co-located teams. We had dispersed teams in different locations. So we had this kickoff workshop, as I mentioned, and we discussed the way how we work together. The main focus was on teaching Scrum, because still many people were not really familiar with this way of working. And I think key learnings from my end in retrospect was that we didn't include senior management stakeholders at that time, and I think it's super crucial to get this alignment together with the management. And also something that is super important in certified less basic courses is to focus on the why behind the change. Help participants understand the organizational design implication that LESS brings, and let them come up with the conclusion why it's important to do the changes, this structural changes, like having only one product owner or one product backlog. Regarding the team setup, as I mentioned, this is something that we luckily been able to do, and we created these teams that unfortunately were dispersed on multiple locations, but at least they were feature teams. And by that, we removed the dependencies between the teams, which was unbelievable important for us to be able to really deliver product increments after every single sprint. Now, what happened with product owner? So we started with so-called product owners. We had fake product owner business analysts. We call them business product owners, and then we had team like IT product owners and business product owners. And this IT product owners were the fake product owners, business analysts. And on top of that, we had on the business side, the fake product owner project managers. I don't know if this sounds familiar to some of you. This is like, in my experience, this is what happens if there is no clear understanding about Scrum, and you have the manifestation of LARMAN'S law, that people are you cannot change basically the organization because the organization is intrinsically optimized to keep the status quo. And we started with this kind of setup for a quite long period of time. But what happened with time is that the fake middlemen, the fake product owners on in the teams, so the business analysts, with time realize that they have no power to actually influence the product. And they became real business analysts with the time, or they moved away if they didn't want to have this responsibility and to work together on the team, not only on business analysts, but actually on everything that helps the team to deliver value. And the same happened with the so-called fake product owner project managers that came from the business side, who after sometimes realized that they had no power of deciding if their kind of feature was more important than another one. I started to organize user story mapping workshops with all of those fake PO people, and I asked them to come up with a clear list of priorities. And that's how we started, basically come up with one product backlog. And that's where all the discussions started, and many conflicts arise about what is more important, is this or this. And we make sure that there is a ordered list of all the product backlog items. And again, this led to many conflicts, and to some point of time, many, especially on the business side, went away and looked to do something else because they saw no powers. Because at the end, someone very close to the chief digital officer was starting, being responsible of making this hard decision: what is more important and what not. So this person became then the real one product owner, or product owner, as we call it in LeSS. And again, this is also something how what happens on the product backlog side. So using shared meetings where everyone was invited, at least this critical people, and we discussed the ordered list of priorities. This creates the this view on the product backlog, and that was for us extremely critical. And by the end, we just had only one product backlog, but this took quite some time, and I think at least half a year, and still there were single people that were trying to do backlog refinements with a dedicated team, but having these regular meetings, especially before the sprint planning meeting, with all representatives, and making sure that the list comes in the planning meeting ordered, just changed this behavior, and it led to the fact that some of these fake PPOs didn't see any point in refining items that at the end were ordered very low, and those teams that have been refined them didn't get the chance to work on them. So basically, this is the way how it happened. And another critical factor for us was the technical excellence. We managed to decrease the mainline code checking intervals, and increase the comprehensiveness of the automated test suite. We built, I think, around 1,000 unit tests, and
we have a question.
Yep.
Question about the product, the real overall product owner.
Yes.
How this decision has been made? Did fake POs turn into just accountable stakeholders, or what happened to them? So
again, some of them, I go back to this slide. So the ones that were already on the team side and very much integrated with the teams, they were doing business analysts anyway most of the time. And we make it clear that it's not only they should not only do business analysis, but actually help with everything that the team needs. If as they're part of the teams. And some accepted this role, and some others didn't and move away. And for the other fake product owners, they actually, again, with those kind of, they started a conflict basically on prioritization. And we had a lot of discussions with many of them. And they either left the organization because they wanted to be responsible for a product, and they realized that they're not product owners; they are just some kind of feature owners. But basically, if we keep the focus on the system optimization goal, and not optimize for a single team, but actually for the whole product, then we need to prioritize the product backlog items in the whole context. So over the whole backlog. And for many, this was very frustrated. So they didn't point it. Some moved into product management, and were more dealing with stakeholders and understand our customers, and made a transition to become better product managers, and being able to clarify and refine the needs of the customers. That's basically what happens. And the others, I think many of those actually left in the organization.
All right, thanks.
All right, so moving back to the technical excellence, I think what was really crucial here, we had some experience with DevOps, and we had people that have been doing continuous delivery and continuous deployments for many times, and we involved those people, and they taught everyone in the teams that it's not about setting a CI system to do continuous integration, but it's actually a mindset of continuously integrating code as a development practice. That was super crucial for us, and with that implemented this mindset in the teams. We created a better environment and better code, and we also adopted stop and fix to actually for all the teams to stop when there were bugs, and to fix this before to moving on with something else. So that helped tremendously with the adoption. We also adopted communities, and I think that was also a very important part. Some are suggested by LeSS, and well, some maybe not so, like the last one. But for us, they were critical, just to improve the alignment between the teams. And especially the Scrum Master community was good to align between the Scrum Masters and to keep everyone motivated and stay sane, which is critical, because as Elad mentioned, there are so many things that go wrong in the beginning and are not working well, even worse than before. So it's super important that you stay sane and everyone else keeps the morale.
It's interesting that you have the fake product owner community. It's it probably hasn't been named like that, but could you share insights? So what were the topics and the goal of the community?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mentioned before. That was basically on the one side, there was a way where we explore the alignment between the different works that the fake product owners were doing, and creating this product backlog. But on the other side, it was also used basically to discuss, like, what's their role, what's the value that they bring, and so on. It was quite a not so easy event, I would say, this regular community meetings.
Yeah.
So in summary, we I draw this working model, which I guess when you're familiar with LeSS, it comes very familiar with you. We had the sprint planning meeting, one with we did it most of the time with all the teams, because by the time I left, I think we were 6 teams, and again, it was done online. So it was not such a big cuddle of many people. And then we had sprint planning 2, which was done separate. We usually had a solution design alignment and an architecture alignment before and after the product backlog. So the one was solution design alignment, was something like directly after the planning, and the architecture alignment was more like after the product backlog refinement. Why did we use this? That was a kind of a chance for team members to discuss how basically the architecture will change over the next sprint. What are the things that will most likely happen? I think if you usually do community and if you do architecture design workshops, you will have this kind of, you don't have to call them solution design alignment or architectural alignment meetings. But there were more or less design workshops with architectural design workshops with multiple people from every team. Yes, and then we had, of course, one shared sprint review every sprint, and the team retrospectives. I will come now with the conclusion. What were the critical aspects? And again, then I will move on with learnings, and I will compare this with LeSS Huge. And what the critical aspects from my side, of course, were to establish the LeSS framework rules from the beginning, which we didn't. But the fact that we had at the end managed to establish one product backlog, and one product owner, and the LeSS events, that were quite critical, and we did it by continuously reflecting on the overall system and continuously adapting. I think that's what created the cultural shift. Of course, having self-managed team with product ownership and pride was essential. For us, as I mentioned, we have the stop and fix rules, we always use that. We use Slack to see basically whenever something was broken, and there were many volunteers to come up and say, I'm going to take over and I will be fixing that. And then the other things like removing structural barriers and eliminating roles were super important, and abandoning any special responsibilities for special group of people. Now, again, if you study Larman's law of organizational behavior, you know that organizations are implicitly optimized to avoid changing the status quo. Usually what happens is that nothing changes. Just a new terminology is introduced to like user stories or story points.
I think we have a question. Let me
yeah.
see if I make Alona ask that. Alona, do you want to ask a question? No, I guess. All right, let's keep writing the questions down for this talk, and for the next one, for the panel discussion, you guys will be able to answer them. Sorry,
yeah.
Albert.
No problem, absolutely. You need to make sure that Larman's law doesn't take effect, and you basically start doing the same thing people don't want to change, and you try to introduce a change, but actually you start doing the same things as before, and people try to resist this kind of change. And I think we had it in our case to some extent, but luckily we've been successful in doing the most necessitative change, like keeping you know, focusing on this one product backlog and one product owner who was overruling decisions, and at the end was the only person that was actually deciding the priorities, that basically helped us in becoming better. For me, the biggest learning is similar to what Elad said, is don't try to do less evolutionary if you can, but establish a structure from the beginning. Take your time to talk with, educate everyone at the beginning, why this is so crucial, especially the management team, but also you need the buy-in from all the team members. So do the education and put an organization design in place with one product owner, and no additional roles from the beginning. Apply volunteering as much as possible, and if possible, get coaching support, work with coaches have done this before, and can support you with that. And most important, also get business and development department to work on the same shared objectives and goals, and not work against each other. And now, if I compare this with my less huge adoption, where I was involved for 1 year, I started actually my engagement just when the less moved to less huge. So from 8 teams, we moved to 16 teams. And there was completely different setup. There was, the setup was from the beginning, there was self-designing team workshop. Elad mentioned them, and I think Wolfgang Steffens will talk about this tomorrow at large. And those were done at the beginning of the less adoption, and at the beginning of the less huge adoption. So everything was set up from the beginning, and you still see the same things as I mentioned on the slide before for the less adoption, which in my opinion are most critical. And that's not surprisingly, that's exactly why we have in less the less rules. But as differences, and that's maybe something interesting, is that I noticed there's a huge amount of education needed in less huge, of course, because the organization is bigger, and usually you don't have that much education available. You don't have that much coaches and Scrum Master with that knowledge. And another thing that happens a lot is that Scrum Masters spend don't spend enough time with the teams, while in LESS, usually there are hopefully enough Scrum Master, experienced Scrum Master who spend time, critical time with the teams. And and at the beginning, you really need to spend time with the teams and coach them. And then, of course, in huge organization, there's a huge amount of organizational politics that you might not have in smaller, less adoptions. And another thing that I notice is a higher feeling of necessity for a change group. What do I mean by that? Well, usually people become have problems with the making decisions. So in the old world, it was pretty clear that management was taking care of decisions. Now in less organization, managers are not dealing anymore with decisions relating to product priorities or to product development decisions. And these are usually done by team members. So there is, and actually every kind of decision has some change of the organizational behavior. And that's super important, that you spend time to understand and to show the teams the way they are for collaborating and making decisions. What often I see happening is that Scrum Masters create a Scrum Master community, and they actually create some kind of change group, making decisions for others, or communities making decisions for the rest of the teams. And it's super important to remember then that in less adoptions, there are no change initiatives. There is no change group or change management. Change happens continuously through experimentation and improvement. So you need to use like the overall retrospectives, for example, to retrospect together with team members from all the teams what are important change and to improve the processes. And the same with that communities cannot make decisions for the teams. That is an important guide from my perspective in LESS, which I see often overrules because there is not enough education on how to make decision, how to make agreements and share them with the rest of the teams. So I'm concluding this presentation with some tips that might help you with your adoption. Of course, lots of education and coaching. Spend a lot of time, create sessions as much as possible, and talk with team members about the principles behind LESS, because those are the ones that should guide all decisions. And for Scrum Masters to spend at the beginning a huge amount of time with their teams, not to to start working with 3 teams at the same time, or spend time with the product owner team. Yes, product owner team in less huge needs support definitely from a Scrum Master, but the teams also need it. So you need to make sure that the teams are supported. And tech managers to focus teach managers to focus on the capability of the development system. So to spend time at the producing Gemba and understand how to improve the problem-solving capabilities of team members and the organizational design decision-making. And last but not least, increased understanding about coordination and decision-making techniques. Learn from LESS, from the third LESS book, about coordination techniques, and speak openly about that with the whole organization. Yeah, and that's it. Now I'm through, and thanks for your time.
Robert, we have a few questions on the topic of the product owner and the product owner team. I guess we do Q&A with Robert for like 5 minutes, then we're gonna have a break, then we will start the panel discussion, which is also Q&A, so actually can continue that. So how many people in a team and how many teams one PO can lead in your example, in your experience? How big are the development teams or the teams, and how many of these teams PO can handle?
Well, I mean, unless we have like in Scrum, teams between 5 and 7 people, and a product owner should be able to lead at least 8 teams, because again, product owner will not focus on the details, clarifying details of the product backlog items, but focusing on the priorities.
Mm-hmm. How not to turn one backlog into a trash when a company has many different directions?
Well, I think what helps are techniques like impact mapping or user story mapping. I totally support ways of visualizing the product backlog in a way that is hierarchical and not linear, so that you can understand you have different options to achieve expected outcome. And I'm a huge fan of outcome based backlog, like Jürgen de Smet is proposing this in his talk.
Right. You've mentioned product owner team, PO team. Who is the part of this team?
Sorry?
You've mentioned the product owner, PO team. Who is in this team?
The product owner and the area product owners in LeSS Huge.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned techniques for coordination and decision making. Other techniques you can share except for Just Talk technique, which is the most popular last?
Yeah, right. Just Talk is definitely the most popular, and it's a super important one. I think from my perspective, extremely important is to communicate in code, to continuously integrate as fast as possible, as soon as possible, and communicate with continuous integration. But of course, communities are important for that, to get agreement, and then make this agreement transparent. Make sure in communities, that's something that I'm missing, is that again, people that create communities because they are passionate about the topic, and they try to convince other people, and they make sure that there is at least one person from every team in their community who is passionate about this topic, and presents the outcomes and the agreements of the different communities, and gets the buy-in of the teams. So for me, this is the way it basically shows: make the agreements transparent, and get someone who's passionate, and try to convince and make sure that get the buy-in from all the team members regarding those decisions, not force them upon the other team members. And there is, of course, open space and the cross-team meetings that we have in LeSS, like a multi-team refinements and so on.
So clarification to the question about who is in the PO team. So no UI UX people that are supporting the PO are part of the PO team. Then are they the part of the development teams then?
From my perspective, they can join, but mostly it's the area product owners and the product owner who are part of this team, supported usually by a Scrum Master.
All right. Thanks. I guess we're out of our time box for this talk. Thank you very much, Robert.